Welcome once again to the Country HQ Spotlight On podcast. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by none other than Henry Wagons. It's been a long time coming. I've wanted to get Henry on the show for years, and it's finally happened, guys. So
let's do it. Let's do this, Adam.
Henry, you're one of Australia's most charismatic country voices. Our very own Kinky Friedman, as I'd say. But
I'll take that. I'll take that.
Career over 2 decades. We're going to dive into the new album, The Four Seasons, your creative journey, and some special collaborations. Henry, thanks for joining us. Let's dive in.
Sure thing. I'm pumped to be here.
Mate, I want to start going back a little bit. I want to ask you, how and when did music first find you?
Well, not until relatively late. I'm not one of those guys that played music at school. I was always a bullshit artist. I always liked to throw around ideas and talk. But I didn't start playing guitar until I was at uni, really. I had a guitar lying around from when I took guitar lessons on classical guitar when I was in about grade 4 or 5. I reckon I went to 4 lessons and didn't get into it because I was playing lame-ass classical songs, I guess, and I didn't know any of them. But I sort of discovered the world of tabs online, and I could find a way I could quickly learn my favorite songs, and I kind of took to it pretty quickly, and so I didn't really. So I had this guitar lying around. I don't know why I picked it up, but I never put it down basically since I was 18, and started playing in bands, writing my own songs, and it was my social group. It was my identity. And it took over my life, really.
Was there one album or one artist that you just saw or heard an album? For me, when music was I heard Forever Now, for instance, by Chisel, or Battered to Hell by Meatloaf,
right,
and so on. Was there one album or one song or one artist that you just flicked that switch in you?
Well, in terms of playing kind of twangy stuff, there was a few things that happened to me at once. Johnny Cash's American Recordings was huge. A friend of mine from school gave me the first American Recordings record. Maybe it was a third, Solitary Man.
The third one, Cash 3.
Yeah. And I really loved his voice and the stories. I listened to that record a lot, and that made me want to make country songs and tell stories. I was also reading a lot of Cormac McCarthy books, the Border Trilogy, All the Pretty Horses, The Road. I loved that sort of psychedelic Western stuff. And then also I really liked Jim Jarmusch, his movie Dead Man, which strangely is a Johnny Depp movie, but that was also really trippy Western, black and white, hypnotic movie, and I seemed to be surrounded by these cosmic country influences, and it just made me want to make some weird country music. And at the time, it was just one project amongst many. I played bass in an indie band called Breaking the Law. I was playing in a noise band that and we were named after the Polish word for train station, dworzec. And I had all these. I loved all kinds of music at the time, especially weird stuff. And to me, at that time in the mid to late 90s, country music was so weird. It was nothing like it was today.
Yeah.
Where it's highly accepted and brainwashing the globe. Back in the 90s, I felt it was kind of like a punk move where I was from, in the inner city streets of Melbourne, to play. I was one of the only guys playing in a country band, and it had this weird momentum, more so than any other band I had in my life. And I made a few tapes, and they got spread around, and CDRs and stuff.
Yeah.
Started getting played on the radio, and my life was taken over by it. No complaints here, but all those influences pushed me towards that country music, and it's never felt like pushing shit uphill to this day, 25 years later.
You're quite right. I mean, that late '90s period too. I mean, that I found the other day, like Bloodshot Records, when you had Kelly Hogan and all those artists there and so on. Bloodshot Records put out a alt country version of Jesus Christ Superstar.
What?
You know?
I need to check this out.
Yeah, exactly. It's the most random thing. It doesn't sound anything like the proper cast recording, but it's like, what a fantastic idea. And if you're looking around, like obviously Kinky was still alive and still doing well, but even like Haggard was taking a different slant on things, and you saw the Rick Rubens coming into our world, and as you're quite really saying, like that series of Cash albums. And you're actually going to do some shows early next year on those American recording shows, aren't you?
Yeah, I did a season of it at the Athenaeum Theatre in Melbourne already, a month and a half ago or so, and that was a very swift sellout. So we're bringing the show back in January in and around Victoria, but we have grand plans. Like I said, like this is not a fake origin story. Johnny Cash American Recordings is what first got me into country music. So playing these songs is what is it? Saturn Returns. I'm no horoscopes guy, but it seems like a full circle moment to me. But that '90s period, I mean, there were American influences around. Like that was, of course, Wilco and Whiskey Town and Lucinda Williams. All that stuff was starting to float in via import from America, but not many people were playing it that much. At least where I was in Melbourne, I know it's always been huge in regional communities. But where I was from, there wasn't many people doing it. So yeah, it was a really interesting and wild time to be playing country in and amongst rock and roll bands.
Let's talk about the new album, The Four Seasons. It's your fourth solo album. Mm-hmm. How did this album come together? It's just come over a couple of years during the COVID period, and it's finally come to fruition now. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it was sort of a collection of a whole lot of ideas that have been lying around. I put out an album called South of Everywhere last year. These two albums have come out in quick succession, but South of Everywhere I wrote within a couple of months from start to finish. It was just this torrent of creative expression after basically at post-COVID, when Blues Fest was up and Tamworth, and I got to visit and play these festivals just after lockdown when international bands weren't playing again. And I just, unlike during COVID when I couldn't really finish a song, I went and played and soaked in all these saw these amazing local bands, and it just made me want to write a whole bunch of country songs, basically. I was so excited, and I had this momentum to do it. So that was that record. But when it came time to, hey, let's make another record, I realised I had all these ideas that were half finished that I'd started through COVID that needed some time and attention. And they're kind of more hypnotic, pensive, a little bit more textured, a little bit weirder, that I was starting during COVID, that I've sort of brought to, and they all sort of hung together in this strange way, in their weirdness. They're all kind of desert fried, they're spaghetti western inspired, Morricone inspired, Lee Hazelwood inspired. So a bit of that, I'm really letting that cosmic energy back in. So yeah, I got all these songs together, finished them all off, and I had myself a record that sort of takes you on a bit of a journey. I hope it's a record where you can kind of rest in the recliner, close your eyes, and kind of drift away to.
I've been looking for that word for this album for a few days. You just gave it to me, pensive. I think that's a fantastic examination for it. And you're quite saying, sit in the recliner in the timber-panelled sort of den, with the whiskey there, and a bit of
Good.
Not the lava lamp, but the touch lamp that we always
have.
Yeah. But
like where the lightning hits your fingers.
Exactly
that little
right.
Yeah.
Maybe a cigar in the ashtray.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm going for. Get yourself a nice robe and off you go.
I want to ask you, as the producer as well, the album sort of feels like to me you thought about it from a vinyl point of view as well.
Oh,
side
yeah,
A
yeah.
and side B. Is that something you thought about as the producer as well as the artist?
Totally. The album is called The Four Seasons, and I think I definitely have positioned the songs in terms of heat. Like when I think of summer and the warmer, sunnier seasons, I think of 60s country. I think of spaghetti western. I think of, tube analog warmth and saturation, that sort of red and yellow colored stuff. So a lot of the summer songs and the spring songs are more 60s country inspired.
Yeah.
And then as the weather gets a little colder towards the end of the album and a little icier, I bring in maybe some analog synth textures, some icier tones. There are a couple of songs that even use a drum machine, colder, clinical tones where I'm getting a little more cutting. So yeah, that was a consideration. It's a bit of a journey, through the 4 seasons in that way.
I was about to say, it sounds like a journey of a man.
Yeah.
What he's going through that 4 seasons, what you're going through, and that's it's a hard thing to capture. I think you captured it really well.
Good.
On this album.
Good. Thank you. I'm proud of this record, and I'm glad it's found good home. Like as you might know, I've got the Arias coming up. It's been nominated for an Aria for Best Country Album.
Yes.
And I've been nominated for that category for the last 2 years. My previous album, I was very honoured and surprised, but that was a country record, full stop. I feel like it was inspired by Australian country. I talked about Australia a lot. It's like, oh, good. I'm glad I've hit the spot. But I was actually really surprised when this got a nomination for Best Country Album too, because it doesn't even quite feel like a country record to me. I don't know how you feel about it. I mean, it's sort of, it's country, I guess, in the way that Lee Hazelwood is country too, but or Morricone, but it's sort of something that maybe it's a bit left of country somehow. I don't know what you think.
But I think that's where the ARIA nominations have shown some maturity.
Yeah,
there's a whole raft of things, and I think the albums that they've shown, especially in a time when commercial country music is doing so well, huge amounts of numbers and tours and so on. I think ARIA's shown a lot of maturity in their selections this year, such as yourself. I think Troy's nominated, and
I love Troy's record. If he doesn't win, if I win and Troy doesn't win, I'm demanding a recount. He needs to get this one. It's my favourite Troy album ever.
It's a great album.
I think it's so amazing, and it's a career-defining moment for him, and I'm very excited about his direction, and he better win it. I don't know if there's a way to rig it so I don't win it, but I do it.
Do the full Marlon Brando if you win and then set the whole thing.
I'll hand it over.
But that's like Troy's moving into that alt country side of things now, and I think he's probably a foreground. He probably had those in him to start with.
I know
from a commercial point of view, it would have been quite challenging.
From talking to him about it, I know he's a massive devotee of the likes of Jason Isbell, and he wants to get deep and real in his songwriting and tell the stories of others like Jason Isbell's so good at too, with that kind of dexterous honesty, simple and both simple and complicated at the same time. I think Troy's hit that on the head. My record compared to Troy's is just a acid trip. It's a good trip though. It's a good trip.
But that's something that I find, so many musicians, you know yourself, your musical upbringings and your exposure, and probably your time spent with Lachlan Bryan, about the artists of Jerry Jeff Walker and Guy Clark and so on. But I've had many a late night discussion with Adam Harvey and Troy Cassar-Daley and about the writings of Guy Clark and the stylings of the time we were Towns and him were working together, and it's just like these people know this depth of music as well. And when it comes out in the music like Troy's album has now, I think it's not only very mature, it's very brave for him to do, because in the commercial sense he'd be quite pressured. But is that something you feel not only as an artist but also in your role as host of Tower of Song, that artists have to really balance out the commercial success of something versus their own internal desire to produce something that's true to themselves?
Personally, I've never felt that pressure, in that I don't think as an artist you can make an album that you're not into. I find it wouldn't hold my attention. You wouldn't ever get it finished. And part
you can hear it too.
Yeah. I think if you're making songs that you don't like, you just don't end up finishing it for whatever reason. you don't have the momentum to do it. I know there's some exceptions in the pop world where, perhaps a singer has got a band arrangements and other people are looking after the music. But in terms of my own, where I have to drive most of it by choice, I can't make anything that I'm not into because it's such a huge undertaking to make 10, 12, 14 songs that if I wasn't into it, it's just like pulling teeth. Like you just couldn't do it. So I don't know. I have very weird influences. I've grown up with I've had a strange upbringing. I'm surrounded by the constant weirdness of the dank laneways of Melbourne. So my music's always going to reflect that, and I'm proud that it does. But I think commercial people that are really into commercial country love that sound just as much as I love my sound. There are other people in the ARIA category that are definitely more on the commercial side, but I don't think it's any less of an authentic expression of what they like. It's just there are some of their influences. We're all just imitating our heroes, trying to make great songs, and they all come from different points of the compass. But I honestly believe that you can't make a good record that cuts in any way unless it's an authentic expression of what you're doing. And commercial artists love commercial music, I think, and that's fine, and it's beautiful.
But that authenticity, I remember the first time I saw you, it was one of the first late night alt sessions that Matt Henry
right. Early Tamworth.
I remember we were up there and I think Greta was hosting. Casey was there, Marlon Williams was there. And it's like,
I remember that year.
And so if there's a fire, everyone dies. The whole alt country scene dies because we're all going to die. But I remember you were on stage and it's very late and you were just about to sing Willie Nelson and you said, okay, anyone who knows the words to this, get up on stage. One or two people struggled up.
Yeah.
And you stopped and said, I just said anyone who knows the words.
Yeah.
Half the damn room emptied up onto the stage, Mate Bill Donohoe and everyone's up there. It's like another safety hazard. But I thought to myself, this is someone who doesn't care about the pretentiousness of the stage. He wants to share it with everyone who's invested in his music. And I thought to myself at that time, I turned to my uncle who was with me, and I said, this guy's the real deal. This is just the real deal. And I've seen that. And I've seen that like when you and Lachlan do your shows together as well. Mm-hmm. And you talk about people you admire. I see when you play together, I'm sure you've had it's a documentary to be made. You guys on tour together, I'm sure, some sort of goggle box. But I see when you play with each other, you and Lachlan Brian, you're watching each other as you're playing each other's songs and so on. And there's that admiration and that respect and that dignity between you two as musicians. So
yes.
Whereas a lot of time it's just like, oh, and now my special guest is, and you don't get that. It's because someone's been told to say that or that's the spot and so on. But every time I've seen you play, Henry, your authenticity and that authenticity shines on this album. I mean, I want to talk about Surrender. And the duet with Queenie. I mean, and Queenie features a few times throughout the album as well, but Surrender is such a great track. I mean,
thanks.
What was the process in selecting Queenie to join you on this?
Well, Queenie and I wrote that song together along with one of my friends, Mark, who's a member of Wagons, my original band. It was sort of his basic idea, and I just loved it so much. His idea was only like 10 seconds, and then we built it together into a whole song. But I sort of brought the embryo to Queenie when we were recording together, and she's a great writer, a great songwriter. I don't know if you've ever got to see her play, but
I've seen her play. Special.
She's got an incredible voice and an incredible presence. And I got her music at my radio show. I met her when I was hosting the APRA Awards one year, and it's like, we should write a song. And in a matter of a week, we'd written kind of 5 songs, and 3 of them appear on this record. And she sings backing vocals throughout the album too. I think she's just one of my favourite voices in the country. And she's put out an incredible solo record. Look her up if you haven't already.
We're always good fans over here. And I love the duet you guys did last year on the Sunny Boys cover too. I mean, that's a whole different. I'm thinking to myself, what's this sound like? And all of a sudden it's like, this could be in the Austin Powers sort of sound. It's very different, but it was so cool to do, and it's such a great song anyway. We've got so many of those great Australian songs that just don't get covered. was at a country festival a few weeks ago, and all the American artists were doing Australian covers. And I heard Jet 4 times, and I heard AC/DC 4 times. And so, guys, there's more songs than
that's
3 or 4 songs. You know,
I hear.
Mate, what about that? I said you just don't come off tour overseas with Lachlan.
Yes,
Lachlan Bryan. And
we did a month together across North America, Canada, the USA, and Mexico City, and I've been touring for a quarter of a century, and it was my favourite ever tour. It was like being a kid in a candy store, and the tour was an advent calendar. Usually in tours, shit goes wrong. Like, there are arguments, there are flat tyres, there are hangovers, there's excess baggage costs, there's broken headstocks, poor attendances. This tour had none of this. Like, no, the tour was huge. We were supporting. Awesome. We were lucky enough to be supporting this band, the Dead South, who are a very popular band from Canada. So we're playing to at least a couple of thousand people every night. We don't have the burden of bringing these people. We just get to play to them. Yeah. Some of these places were beautiful old theatres. We played in a couple of hockey arenas. Wow. It was insane, through Canada, where their home country. So it's good, and it seems as though it's not the last time we're going to get to play with them either, which is exciting. So it was just great, just eating lobster rolls in Boston, eating pizza in New Haven, Connecticut, tacos in Mexico City, obviously, poutine in Canada. Food is a big part of my touring as well, and I love that too.
Those who don't know, the Dead South is a band, fantastic. What would you call them, Henry? Alt bluegrass, country band, so on. And
alt bluegrass is
$250 million plays.
Yeah,
$250 million plays on YouTube.
Yes,
so check them out. They're a fantastic band. They've been here twice. They were here earlier this year. We saw the Americana Fest a few years ago, and they were truly fantastic. So
between you
and me,
next time
you guys are on tour there, I'm going to come and film the whole thing. There's a documentary waiting to be made there. We can
mate, you should come
put it on Netflix.
There are. I swear there were some good things to see last time we were through. You'd be welcome, Adam. Come and point a camera our way.
Mate, on this album too, you paid tribute to late great Justin Townes Earle. Mm-hmm. Poor Steve Earle to go through the life he's gone through.
Yes,
Steve Earle's one of my heroes, and I've met him a few times, and could be more generous with his insights and his time, but. To lose his son like that and so on, and then you knew Justin as well, and I've met him a few times as well. How hard was that for you, or was it more easier to pay homage to your late friend? Oh,
it was when he died. It was incredibly hard. I actually had to broadcast the day he died, and it was incredibly difficult. And I did the whole show in tribute to him. But yeah, he was a friend. And in a large part, responsible for my career, both at home to some degree and in America. He took me over to tour with him twice over in the US. And we crossed paths numerous times throughout his life. And yeah, he was a very special, turbulent tornado of an individual, highs and lows, peaks and troughs, but you could always wind him up and let him go, and he'd tell you an incredible story, be it about baseball, about living in New York City. We both spent a bit of time in New York City near Greenwich Village, Alphabet City, so we'd share some stories about streets around there. But yeah, he was a very special guy, an incredible songwriter. Dare I say, almost as good as his dad, Adam.
Yeah, well, shame they didn't do more work together.
They were coming to a better space, I think, where they could do that. And it's a shame.
I remember JT told me, he said, Steve missed my birth. And Mum was really unhappy with him because Steve probably wasn't in a good space then. Yeah. And he turned up and he's carrying a jar. And Justin had already been born. And he said, Dad stopped on the way to get some red dirt because he wanted to make sure the first thing that touched my feet was Texas red dirt.
Oh, wow.
And it's it's a fantastic story. Steve Earle's such a wildfire anyway, and he had this moment to stop and think, well, I want my son to touch Texas dirt first. That's how true they are. But
that's cool.
Yeah, and that Justin album that he made for his son. I mean, those tribute albums Steve Elton made, similar to the American Recordings albums, they're such seminal albums, the Towns and the Guy album and the Jerry Jeff album, and then to his own son. I mean, it's a tour I'd love to see him just do those songs, but I'm sure it would be very hard and harrowing because they're not only his son, but these three other men who are very close friends and mentors.
Yes.
To him as well, very much so.
Well, the tribute, like we play One More Night in Brooklyn on the new record, and you know, it's actually the only track where my original band Wagons, who played with him a couple of times across a couple of tours, you know, they really wanted to be a part of that tribute. So, you know, there's a dash of Wagons in the middle of the Henry Wagons record.
I think we should do a tribute to Justin in Tamworth Hotel one night, maybe in Tamworth one year.
That sounds like a good plan.
Get the gang
that
together.
Sounds like a good plan.
Last question, Henry. Thank you so much for your time today. I want to ask
Not at all.
you, whether it be in Wagons, with your band, whether it be in a solo sense, what's it like when you take the stage and you're Henry Wagons live on stage? What do you feel like?
I feel like that movie Predator. I feel like I mean, essentially a musician by and large when they're on the road is getting to play the same songs more or less every single night. And what I really get off on is the different places and different faces I'm playing with. And when you're on stage, every problem, I'm kind of an anxious guy. I'm thinking about 100 things at once. But when I'm on stage, all of those problems disappear. And I'm in this flow state, as they say, where I'm not for a second worried about anything other than being present with the audience. Hopefully that's what you saw at Alt Country. I think it's really special and really important for a performer to be completely there for the crowd, in service of the crowd. And sometimes the worst gigs are when you don't feel like who you're watching is actually there. They're sort of just thinking about other shit, playing through the songs. I have to be there because I love it. I love being completely present. And you know, in that film Predator, where he looks out at Arnold Schwarzenegger and, you know, everything's blue and green, but then you can see the body heat of people. It's sort of like I'm constantly scouring the audience and the place for pieces of heat that I can see or respond to or interact with. And it's thrilling. And the openness and flow that it gives me in that moment when I'm performing is unlike any other moment in my life. I'm still me. Like I don't know. And the people that know me best know that who I am on stage is an extension of me. Some people who don't maybe think I'm completely different, but it's just this beautiful present state that I love. So there's probably a longer, more high concept answer than anyone's interested in. But that's what it's like for me.
It reminds me of two things that I've read before, just to wrap up. It's Elvis used to say, he goes, if you behave like the audience, you'll end up in the audience. Oh. And you go out whether you're playing to 10 people or 5,000 people, and you play like you're playing at Wembley. You know?
Yeah, I do.
And then I remember Don Henley once wrote, and he said, sorry, Glenn Frey wrote, he said, he goes, I look for that one person in the crowd that's not getting it, and I focus on that person until they get it, you know. And he goes, and then I just find the next person, you know, because he wants to connect. And I think you do that too. You understand it's a show, it's a showmanship. Yes, it's a business, but it's also, you know, people are taking their time and their effort to be part of that community.
Yes,
we have here in country music, but also part of the experience of enjoying your show. And we're hopefully going to enjoy your shows. You've got those American recording shows coming up. Heading to Tamworth?
Yeah, well, it still to be determined.
TBC.
To be determined, yeah. I think chances are pretty good, but I'm still locking a few. I'm lucky enough to be weighing up when I'm going to the UK early in the year, and I just need a couple more pieces to fall into place. But I have got launches in Melbourne and Sydney coming up on the 23rd and 29th of November. Cash coming up. So yes, there's a lot going on, and
Cash coming up to Sydney. Hopefully, we want to see that show up in Sydney a few times.
Yes,
Sydney Opera House is beckoning for Cash and Henry Wagons. I'm sure.
Oh my God, let's do it. Let's do
fantastic. We'll see you on the 29th at the Sydney gig.
Yes,
and we can't wait to see. Henry Wagons, congratulations. The 4 Seasons, it's a fantastic album. It's pensive. I'm just going to keep using that word.
I
Thank
love
you
it.
for that.
I love it.
But it's fantastic. I really enjoy it. It's one of those albums I had, and I thought to myself, I want to wait. And I waited probably a week or so.
Yeah.
And then I listened to it, and I remember I did that with Lachlan's first album.
Yeah.
And I listened to it and went, oh, shit, I've just wasted a week. Should have listened to it back then. But thank you so much for sharing it and for sharing your time today. And everything you do for not just country music, but musicians in Australia. You're emceeing lots of things. You host your amazing show, Tower of Song, on Double J. And musicians I've worked with in the past and so on that say anytime they need you or call you, you're more than helpful with your advice and input. So
mate.
For what you contribute. It's Australian Music Day, I think, today here. And Australian Music Month here in November. So we all get to share. And people like you are going to help us share for the next 50 and 100 years, mate. Thank you so much for
that. And thank you for taking your time gas bagging with me. I really appreciate it. I look forward to running into you at Tamworth. Fingers crossed.
See you soon.